Sharing your faith. Does that phrase scare you? After all, no one wants their friends or their families or coworkers to think that they're the weird ones. What if sharing your faith was as natural as having a backyard cookout? What if it didn't have to be weird? The good news of Jesus Christ is so profound, but at the same time, so simple. It's so important that to not share the good news is like keeping the cure for cancer to yourself. So, where do we as a church go? And what do we do to tell everybody we can about Jesus? As individuals, how can we move from superficial relationships like talking about the weather and the ball game to talking about eternity? How do we avoid the common pitfalls associated with telling others? The gospel is world-shaking news. Are you ready to sit for a spell? Let's talk.
Great to see you here today. As you saw from that pretty awesome video, we are kicking off a brand new series called Backyard Gospel. Pretty excited about it. This is actually one of the most important series we've ever done in the life of our church. And so we've tried to not overhype it the last couple of weeks, but we've tried to help you understand the seriousness of that, and hopefully that you're here. I'm glad you're here today. Hope you'll continue to be here and make a commitment throughout the month of May to be here for this series as we talk not only about the vision where our church is headed, but also how you can play a part in that and giving you some tools to make that possible. And so a part of that, I want to remind you, give you a couple announcements of some things that we want you to make sure that you make a priority about in this series. The first is, next week, as we've announced several times, on May 8th, we are making a major announcement that kind of impacts everybody in our church. So if you call this your church home, or if you know somebody who's one of those people that shows up like once a month, you can tell them it's okay to come twice this month, okay? May 8th would be a great time for you to be here. You're going to hear about a lot of things that are coming at you, and it's going to be a pretty special morning for us, I think. Also, May 15th, 2 weeks from now, we've again, mentioned this several times, we are going to have a special offering that morning. We have a campus in Lagodi we're hoping to launch here sooner rather than later, and we want to try to financially get that off the ground. And so that morning, we are hoping for a $100,000 offering that we here on this campus would begin to send that off and begin to do the work of the ministry that we want to get going up there. And so what we've asked is that every single person in our church would sacrifice to try to give double what they do on a weekly level. Some of you give monthly, and so you'll have to do some math to figure that out. That's okay. But we want you to try to sacrifice and give double what you typically would that Sunday so that we can just outpour some love up for that Lagodi campus. Some of you can give more than that. That's great. But either way, we're going to have a special morning that morning as we do that in an incredible way. Also, want to let you know, starting tonight at 6 p.m. and running for 4 weeks, we're doing something pretty special, unique for us. We're doing this Backyard Gospel Crash Course. You're going to hear us talk a little bit about the vision this morning and some things that you're responsible for. We're going to take it the extra mile in that class for 4 weeks, teach you how to share your faith, how to win your neighbors to Christ in an incredible way. I would encourage you to be there. We already have a lot of people signed up. We have childcare provided. Even if you haven't signed up, show up tonight, 6 p.m. Daryl's teaching tonight. Richard and myself are teaching some of the future sessions of that, and it's just going to be, I think, a great chance for you to become a true disciple and not just a church attender. So again, make sure these things are some priority. This is a big, influential series for us, and we want to make sure that we as a church are headed all in the same direction with some exciting new things coming our way. Well, with all that said, as we kick off this sermon series, and as I start this sermon this morning, I want to begin by asking a question. It's simply this: what would it look like if the city or town where you live was completely full of Jesus' presence? What would it look like if the city or the town where you live, whether that's Jasper, Lagodi, Huntingburg, French Lick, wherever, was completely full of Jesus' presence? That's a bold question. It's a scenario that most of us have never pondered, but it's something worthy of our thoughts, and it's worthy of our pondering. You see, Jesus wants to do something very great, and I wonder sometimes if We sell him short. That what it would look like if the church, we didn't just do church, but we were the church in such an epic fashion that people from all walks of life every day would encounter Jesus in the way that they live. Well, Jeff Vanderstelt in his book Saturate actually ponders this question and paints maybe a picture for us of what it would look like. He says, can you imagine every city, every neighborhood, every street, every house saturated with Jesus' presence through his people? What if in every school, every classroom, and every extracurricular activity, students daily experience the person and work of Jesus? Can you dream with me of a day when no business office or retail center or industrial hub can get away from the good news of Jesus proclaimed in words and expressed in gracious deeds? A day when every cafe, pub, restaurant, or bakery smells of the aroma of Christ. Church, this is God's intention for you, for us as the body of believers, as the church, and for your backyard, the place where you live. It's his vision, not Jeff Vanderstelt's. It's his vision. He says in Habakkuk 2:14, for as the waters fill the sea, the earth will be filled with an awareness of the glory of the Lord. And he's going to accomplish this vision through his son, Jesus Christ, working through his body, the church. He says this in Ephesians chapter 1, 22 and 23, God has put all things under the authority of Christ and has made him head over all things for the benefit of the church. And the church is his body. It is made full and complete by Christ, who fills all things everywhere with himself. He fills all things everywhere with himself. Jesus is head of the body, the church, in which he intends to fill all things everywhere. He wants his presence to not just to be here inside four walls, he wants it to be everywhere in all areas of life. That's the vision, that's the goal. That God would work through us as the church to shine the light of Jesus into our backyards, on our streets, in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in our towns, that his presence would literally be inescapable for those who don't know him. They would encounter it every single day. In church circles, we oftentimes have a phrase for this. We call it incarnational living. A lot of us know that term incarnation. We say it every year at Christmas. This is the incarnation. We're saying God became human flesh, put on human flesh, and he became visible for all of us to see. That's the incarnation. And that's the same principle of what we're talking about. That we would begin to look like Jesus, that we would represent him in the way that we live. That we would allow Jesus to work so fully in and through us that his presence would be known around to those around us every single day. And you see, 16 years ago, when our lead minister, Daryl Bland, planted this church, that was the vision that was in mind. He felt that God was calling him to a city here in Jasper, into a county in DuBois County that was unchurched and de-churched in a major way. Jesus' presence was missing in so many places. And because of it, the gospel message was missing from so many lives. And so he began to plant a church that was going to be different. A church that was going to be about what's going on outside of the church walls. That God's presence wouldn't just be here, but that it would begin to be everywhere in this area. The people would go leave these walls and they would live in such a way that Jesus' presence would be known via the things they said and the things that they did. And everywhere, people would begin to encounter it as we shine Jesus' light into our backyards. And for 16 years now, this church has grown kind of at an incredible rate because people have bought into this vision. Despite what you might believe, despite what you might have heard, this church has not grown because of the preaching. This church has not grown because of a certain worship style of music that we do. Well, by the way, it's not because of dynamic youth and children's programming. No, this church has grown because men and women have bought into the vision that they didn't just want to do church, they didn't want to just go to church, but they wanted to be the church. They wanted Jesus to work through them. They wanted to be like him every single day in the things that they did. And while this gathering is important, and we get to do some pretty special things here, it's an exciting place to be. And this is a place, this gathering that shapes us, it molds us, it grows us, it challenges us. Our church, like the church has for 2,000 years in existence, has grown in backyards, has grown around dining room tables, has grown in living rooms, has grown in cubicles, has grown in the stands at ball games, and has grown in classrooms. Because of the sacrifices that men and women have made in this church, God's presence, Jesus' presence, has begun to fill a lot of people's lives. It's began to be known. And because of these sacrifices, a movement has begun to take place. In fact, I don't think there's really any denying it. I don't know about you, but I sense it and I feel it all the time. Every time I enter this building and I see what's going on here, I sense and I feel that something's happening, something's moving. I feel like I blinked and we went from like being a church of 1,200 to like 1,700 overnight. I sense it and I feel it every time I talk to someone who's had their life transformed through Jesus Christ by the work of this ministry and some of the things that are going on. I sense it and I feel it every time I'm beyond these walls, and I'm out in the community and I hear about our people doing something to repair brokenness in lives and people's situations around us. I mean, we don't take credit for it, but there's no denying God has done something very real in our midst. There is growth that is taking place. And because of it, our influence has grown more and more. Our backyard is growing. In fact, we keep finding out more and more people that are making longer and longer commutes to be a part of this church body. It's a rare Sunday that I don't meet somebody new that's driving upwards of 40, 45 minutes, all the way up to an hour to be a part of this church and this body of believers. We could say that because of the ministry that has been happening in backyards, in your backyards, our backyard has grown. And so now 16 years into this thing, we sit at a critical juncture as a church. What are we going to do? Are we going to sit idly by and just celebrate the success we've had for 16 years, play church, enjoy this beautiful building, and do our thing? Or is our vision, is our goal as a church going to grow as our backyard grows? And for our leadership, it's that latter option. In fact, we felt God calling us for some time to something much bigger. As our backyard is growing, we have felt God that is calling us to something much bigger than one building in one physical location in one community. And so it's kind of my pleasure this morning that I get to introduce you to a brand new vision for our church. Now please understand, our mission is still the same here at CCJ. That's not ever going to change. We're going to continue to love God, love people, and change the world. That's our mission. That's biblical. That's going to continue to be at the forefront of our minds. But the vision, or the strategy, you could say, to accomplish that mission is ever changing as needs grow and arise around us. And so our backyard's growing, so our vision's grown. And in fact, this is kind of the vision that we're going to start to operate with. That we want every man, woman, and child in southern Indiana to have a daily encounter with Jesus through words spoken and deeds done by God's people. We want every man, woman, and child in southern Indiana to have a daily encounter with Jesus Christ through words spoken and deeds done by us, his people. In other words, we want to be the incarnation of Jesus Christ. We want to live out every single day what he's done in and through us, through the things that we say, winning people to Christ, and with the deeds that we do, serving those people, so that his presence saturates all of our communities and towns throughout the southern part of this state. Now, if you've been around this church very long at all, you know this is a much larger vision than we've ever operated with before. Much larger vision. In fact, just a few years ago, we kind of took up the mantra as a church, 24,000 reasons. We challenged you. We said, hey, we want to be a church that reaches there's 24,000 people within a 20-minute commute of our church that do not have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and we're challenging you to reach them. And let's be real, there's a lot of work left to be done here in Jasper and in Du Bois County. There's a lot of people that still need to find Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. We feel like God is calling us to a vision much larger than that 20-minute commute. God has placed in our leadership a heart and a passion for the whole southern part of this state. And man, we want to see God's presence known. In fact, just as 16 years ago, Daryl felt God calling him to see an area and a city be saturated with Christ's presence because it was missing. In the same way, we want to do that for towns and cities and areas all throughout the southern part of this state. We have a vision for Jesus' presence being in all of southern Indiana, saturating all of our towns, all of our cities, all of our communities. And so our vision has grown a lot in the process. Now, that's not quite as catchy as 24,000 Reasons. It's a little wordy, yeah? And so you're going to hear us throw around the idea, and you're going to hear us use the terminology, We Heart Southern Indiana. We're going to see it, hashtag We Heart Southern Indiana. Believe it or not, no one had ever used that hashtag before we started using that hashtag, We Heart Southern Indiana. And every time you see that, just know that is the embodiment of this vision. That we want every man, woman, and child in southern Indiana to have a personal encounter with Jesus Christ every day through words spoken and deeds done by us, his people. That's the vision. Now let's be real, that's a pretty big vision. I can see the look on some of your faces like you've got these big eyes of bewilderment like, this is crazy. Like, man, we're one church in one city in one community, like, this is crazy. And just know, if this scares you, it scares me too, and it scares our leadership a lot too. But here's the thing. We believe wholeheartedly in what God has been placing on our hearts, in this passion and this calling that he's put inside of us, that with his leading, and with everyone that calls this church their home, uniting together and partnering together, that we can make it happen. That Jesus' presence can begin to fill southern Indiana in a very dynamic way. That's what this Backyard Gospel series is going to be all about. For the month of May, we want to lay out this new vision, and we're going to talk to you a whole lot about how you go about helping us accomplish that. We're going to get very practical. We're going to get in the weeds, and we're going to give you a lot of tools. We're going to give you a lot of things that you have got to know and got to do to be a part of this vision. But this morning, I simply want to lay the foundation. This is a big vision. How are we going to go about accomplishing it? What's like the framework in which this is all going to operate? And so I'm going to talk a little bit this morning about what our church leadership is going to do, our responsibility in this vision, and then I'm going to spend some time talking about how you can be a part of accomplishing this vision, what the church, the body of believers, are going to have to come together to do in partnering together. And if we both do our part, I truly believe God's going to work through that in a dynamic way to make his presence known in southern Indiana. So I want to start with our church leadership's responsibility in this vision. And it's pretty simple. We've announced to you for a while that God was calling us to launch multi-site campuses. I'm not sure what you thought what that meant. Like maybe we were just trying to like conquer the world or something, but that was not a church growth strategy. That was a kingdom growth strategy. We were taking the responsibility to look beyond one community in that calling. In fact, you could just boil it down to literally saying, our responsibility is we are coming to your backyard. Now, some of you were already in your backyard. You live here in Jasper, but there's a lot of people that's not the case. And we want you to know, we want to come to your backyard. And so we're going to take on the responsibility as a church leadership to look beyond one physical location and begin to pour resources in to other communities and locations well beyond this present facility. We understand that we need to come to many of your backyards so you can be more effective in winning people to Jesus Christ. That it's hard to be a true disciple, winning friends and family members to Jesus Christ if you're saying, hey, come with me, by the way, 30 or 40 minutes or an hour to church. But if there is a campus in your backyard, close to home, you can be a more effective disciple. And so we're taking up the responsibility as a church leadership to begin to make that happen. In fact, we announced several months ago, as I talked about at the very beginning of this sermon, that we are launching our very first multi-site in Lagodi. We're really excited about it. And I can tell you actually for the very first time, I don't know if we've announced this yet, I don't think we have, but Lord willing, if things go as planned, okay, and they don't always, but if they go as planned and we are able to operate on the timeline we want to, we're going to be launching that campus by the end of 2016, possibly in October, okay? Is that exciting or what? Yeah. Now, please understand, this is not a second-rate facility, okay? We are not like trying to just give leftovers. This isn't a spoken wheel model where everything's going on at Jasper and everywhere else, nothing's taking place, okay? They're just getting leftovers and they're just watching the cool things happen here in Jasper. No, this is our church being picked up and put in other communities, starting in Lagodi. In fact, I'm excited about the fact that, we are launching with multiple staff members. In fact, several of you we introduced several weeks ago, you got to meet Cameron and Molly Gladish. Cameron's going to be our campus minister on that campus. We're excited about him. In fact, we're undertaking a massive renovation project over there on a nearly 30,000 square foot facility. This is not leftovers. This is going to be our church. While it's going to be its own expression, our DNA there, so that you can be more effective in winning your friends for Jesus Christ. And while we wait, we're already going to do everything we can to bring Jesus' presence to Martin County. Again, it's not about us being famous. It's not about having this awesome building. It is about Jesus' presence filling all in all. And so we're already in the process of beginning to make his name known. I've gotten the pleasure of kind of assembling a task force team that's doing everything they can to be the hands and feet of Jesus and start to look at outreach projects there. And there's some dynamic things happening. We already have heard that we've got community groups up in that area that are walking the streets of Lagodi, praying over every home and every street. We just got to think, as a staff, for something we didn't do a couple of weeks ago. As some of our community group members, some of our people were in a cemetery in the area, cleaning up and helping it make it look better. Our community groups are getting ready to take on a project where we're going to be loving on and unleashing all kinds of love through some generous deeds, giving gift baskets and all kinds of goods to community leaders and school faculty members. We're going to partner with schools and with community outreach centers so that we can begin to feed and we can begin to clothe those that are in need, because we know Martin County has a lot of needs physically and emotionally. Man, we're excited. We're not waiting to do that. Man, we are jumping in full force right now to make Jesus' presence known. And in the coming weeks, you're going to hear about how you can partner with us in some of those things, how you can jump in as well. And here's what I want you to know. We're not stopping in Lagodi. Man, again, this isn't a church growth strategy. It's a kingdom growth strategy. And there's already other places that God is at work and where there's some of you that are partnering with us in this vision. That you don't just want to do church, that you want to be the church, and you want Jesus' presence to be in all things in your community. And we want to partner in that. And while we don't know what's next, where we're going to go next, whether it's going to be Spencer County or Orange County or Crawford County or Perry County or Pike County, we don't know. We just know that we're not done, that we have a vision that there's something so much bigger, and we are going to take that on as a church leadership. Where we're going to do everything in our power, even though this is going to constantly be a priority. We're not overlooking Jasper. We're just looking above and beyond it too. And we're going to take that on as a church leadership and constantly, prayerfully consider where God is calling us next and do everything we can to allot resources and time to make those things happen. That's our responsibility as a church leadership. But I got to tell you, it pales in comparison to your responsibility as the church. I think sometimes we have a misnomer that we think like the church is like, especially a church this size, that it's like a business or it's an organization. Like I pay my dues and I watch other people do the ministry. Like I don't do it myself, I let other people do the ministry. That's not the case. The church is the body of believers, a movement of people that come together in a dynamic way to live life on mission. And so every single one of us is responsible for that vision. In fact, the reason that we've gotten where we've gotten is there's been people that have taken it upon themselves and sacrificed for 16 years to make Jesus' presence known well beyond 1 hour a week on one weekend. And if we're going to continue to grow, you're going to have to continue to do that in your backyard every single day to make this vision happen. And again, we're going to get much more in the weeds and talk a lot more about this over the next few weeks. But this morning, I just want to give you 3 things that you're going to have to do mindset-wise and change-wise to begin to make this happen. 3 things you're responsible for. And the first one's this. Church, we're going to have to change our focus. We're going to have to change our focus. If we're going to begin this partnership thing, if we're going to begin to make this vision take place, it's going to have to start with us shifting the way we look at our lives and the church. You see, for decades, there's been this thought process in the church that there was a divide between the sacred and the secular. Like God was in church in our activities, but not in the rest of our lives. And so what ends up happening in that is we end up treating the church is where the only place where God's at. Like that's all the important stuff about the church happens in the church building. And many of us end up judging our own lives and other people's lives by how much time we spend in the church building. That was the end all be all. But Ephesians chapter 1 that we just read a little bit ago said, Jesus says, I want to be in all things everywhere. To God, there is no divide between the sacred and the secular. It is all sacred to him. As John Comer says, the cosmic, gargantuan, 24/7 kingdom of God cannot be shrunk down to a few hundred people singing songs in a nice building for an hour every weekend. It's bigger than that. God's presence is bigger than that. He wants to be in all things everywhere. And while I see a lot of people that get this vision, there's a lot of people that don't and still need to understand it. People that only want to act as if God is a part of one part of their lives and not the rest of it. In fact, we live a lot like I once read poet Emily Dickinson say. She said, they say God is everywhere, and yet we always think of God as a recluse. Probably true for a lot of our lives. You see, for so many of us, we compartmentalize. We have a God box, then we have an entertainment box, and then we have a rest box, and then we have a work box, and so on and so on. We cut our lives up into all these pieces. God becomes a time slot in our daily routine, a building that we go to for just a few hours a week. And effectively, we end up just kind of pushing him out of the bulk of our lives. But see, here's the thing. That's not how it works. Now, I know there's a lot of Christians that think to themselves that they are followers of Jesus, but it's only in the church building. Like, man, they're really bought in when they're here. They want to take notes, maybe serve in the children, possibly even tithe. But then they go to work. Or when they're interacting in the ball field at the stands, or when they're interacting with their neighbors, they're just like everybody else. They spend and consume just like everybody else. They go about the same uninteresting, old, tired habits the rest of our world does. They overwork and they get burned out just like everyone else. They say things and they operate as if other things are their priority. There's no difference between them and the rest of the world. But here's what you need to understand, church. There is no box. There is no box. God wants it all. He wants to fill all in all. He wants to fill every street and every neighborhood, every town, every city, every school, every workplace. He wants to be in it all, every single life. He wants all of our lives, and he wants all of who we are. And until we understand that, we cannot make this vision happen. No, church, rather, we need to live what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10:31, where he says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it for the glory of God. He wants to be in all things everywhere. If we want every man, woman, and child in southern Indiana to have a daily encounter with Jesus through words spoken and deeds done by us, we got to start seeing everything as sacred, everything as something that Jesus Christ wants to be in. Jesus wants to be in our ordinary lives to make it extraordinary. So number one, we got to change our focus. But that's not it. Number two, church, it's your responsibility in this vision. You need to love your place. It's not just enough to change your focus. You also need to love where you're at. Now, that might seem like an easy thing for us, a lot easier than the first one. I mean, when you look at the demographic of where we live, we have a lot of people with deep family heritages here. A lot of other people that have roots that go back for generations. It would seem like, man, I got a lot of family around. This isn't hard. And I think for probably the 50 and over crowd, and I don't say that in an insulting way, probably for our 50 and over crowd, that it really is. But for a lot the rest, I hear a lot of a discontentment constantly of where we live. People that are constantly ready to jump to the next thing. You know, we live in this ever-shrinking world thanks to technology and the media. We're more globally aware than we've ever been. And so it's amazing to me the amount of people that I talk to and I hear that are so ready to negatively talk about our part of the state and our community, ready to move on as soon as they can. People that say that we're behind, that we're not big enough, that we don't have enough arts and culture, that we don't have this or we don't have that, and so on and so on. Again, ready to move whenever it would be the opportunity. And in many ways, we don't compare. Compared to the bustling cities on our coast that get all the TV shows about them, all the media coverage, seem to be the greatest places to live. In fact, oftentimes we're called a flyover state. We're self-proclaimed on our signs when you enter the state as the crossroads of America, a place you drive through to get where you're going, and that's about it. In the process, we have been forgotten, we've been overlooked, and in many ways abandoned. And sadly, it totally misses the mark on what I think is an incredible place to live, an incredible place to do life and ministry. In fact, there's a lot of beauty here, starting with just the aesthetic beauty. I mean, I think to myself how beautiful it is to be in this part of the country, the beauty of the rolling hills, the woods, the fields, and the wildlife. I've gotten to travel the world, and there's very few places I've been that are more beautiful in the springtime and the fall than there is in southern Indiana. There's a simplistic beauty to the country roads dotted with farms, with barns, and with rustic charm. The random towns and communities that have grown up in unique places with interesting stories, traditions, and even a laid-back way of life. But the aesthetic beauty hardly compares to the beauty of the people that we have in our part of the country. From those who have an Eastern Kentucky, Tennessee roots to those born to German immigrants, from hardworking farmers to blue-collar factory workers to entrepreneurial business men and women, we have it all. We're a people who love the outdoors, hunting, fishing, and hiking. We're people that love our sports teams, especially if they're local, and have passionately made local gyms and stadiums a place where community happens on a weekly basis. We're people that love our festivals, especially if they're accompanied by a food. We're a people who naturally love other people, known for our Hoosier hospitality and looking after our own. And I say this not so I can get on our next Chamber of Commerce commercial, but rather to help you understand that whether you're a local, or whether you're a transplant or something in between, southern Indiana or the town or the city and where you live is a place worthy of your appreciation and care. It's worthy of your ministry. Your backyard is a place that Christ wants to fill with his presence. And that means you're going to have to learn to love it, the people that inhabit it, and do life alongside them to make Jesus famous. I think this is even more important in the time in which we live, in the place where we live, to show this love, because we're doing something that very few people are wanting to do. I follow and I know all kinds of church planners and church planning organizations, and they're all going to cities and metropolitan areas. The rural areas of our country, especially here in southern Indiana, are being abandoned. We are becoming a spiritual wasteland. In fact, there is something very historic that is taking place right now in our part of the state where a lot of historically great churches are closing their doors and or dwindling and falling apart. All at the same point, we keep hearing of communities surrounding us in counties who are dealing with an increase in poverty rate, an increase in crime rate, are battling the poverty crisis in an incredible way. Jesus' presence is needed more than it's ever been needed before. We need to saturate these communities and these places with Christ, and yet so few are willing to go. But church, it's our backyard. It's our people. We cannot sit idly by and do nothing and not care and live our lives as if Jesus doesn't want to love those people and impact and bring his presence to those things too. And so we have to do everything we can to love these people, love the place that we live, and start a movement to rewrite its story with Jesus right at the center of it. As the authors of the New Parish say, the gospel becomes so much more tangible and compelling when the local church is actually part of the community, connected to the struggles of the people and even the land itself. We are committed to making that a reality here, but we can't just do it as a church leadership. You have to do it as an individual. To not roll up and get in your garage door, not talk to anybody, to talk bad about your neighbors, to act as if there's somewhere else better to live. But as long as God has you here, love with everything you have in you those people around you. Number 2, you got to love your place. And that leads me to the third thing, church, that you've got to do as your responsibility in this vision, and that's use your home. Use your home. Believe it or not, the epicenter of ministry is not in this worship center. It's not in this it's not in this building. The epicenter of ministry happens in your home. As I said earlier, for 2,000 years, the church has grown in living rooms, in backyards, around dining room tables. In fact, it got its start there. Acts chapter 2 tells us that the very beginning of the church, the believers worshiped together at the temple each day, but then they met in homes for the Lord's Supper. They shared meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day, the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. The church grew from day one because they understood this. They opened their homes and opened their lives to those around them, both non-Christian and Christian alike. And in the midst of this authentic community that began to take place, people started flocking to Jesus Christ right and left. Man, it's the heartbeat of ministry. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but the New Testament talks about hospitality really being a requirement for us as Christians. It's mentioned tons of times throughout the New Testament. In fact, the Apostle Paul mentions it as a requirement for elders and leaders in the church. 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1. He mentions it as something that older women should be required to teach younger women so that they can live life on mission too. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 3. You see, the early church understood that while the large group gathering of the church was important and it was vital, that the heartbeat of real ministry took place in their homes, in their own backyards. That when they did a life alongside the people that they lived with in proximity to, with Jesus-centered intentionality, with gospel fluency, letting Jesus' presence flow through them, that people around them would find identity and community with them and with the church. In the coming weeks, we're going to get a lot more into the weeds of this and the nitty-gritty of making your home the centerpiece of your ministry. How you can begin to win people to Christ, starting with your neighbors and starting with your friends. Because we believe every person who claims that this is their church home has that responsibility. But this morning, I just want you to understand and begin to take place that you believe that that's true. That you're compelled to make Jesus' presence inescapable where you live, on your street, in your neighborhood, in your town, in your city. That they would begin to find the compelling grace and love of Jesus Christ through words spoken and deeds done. That you would use your home for ministry. Because we want every man, woman, and child in southern Indiana to have a daily encounter with Jesus Christ through words spoken and deeds done by his people. And that can't happen if our people won't actually do it. So your responsibility in this vision, change your focus, love your place, use your home. Church, that's a trifecta for an incredible movement to continue to take place. It's been those three things that have gotten us where we are today, and it's those three things that are only going to continue to allow us to live out this vision. But I don't want to just tell you about it. I want you to see it firsthand. Begin to look at someone to emulate in your life. And so I want to show you just a quick video. It comes from a church called Austin Stone in Texas that I have a lot of respect for, whose people are living this out. One family in particular who I think every single one of us should desire to be. Watch this.
Okay, both dads are the
Yeah, you're QB, you're kicking out.
Yeah.
Eli.
God can take us anywhere, and we're prepared to go wherever He wants us to go. But while He's got us here, we view this neighborhood as our long-term mission field.
We've been married for, 12
years.
12 years, and we've lived here in this lovely house in Circle C for 8.
As we got to know the neighbors, like right off, we knew we were going to love getting to hang out here. There were just a lot of people that were very welcoming when we got here. Everybody was quick to come over and greet us.
I think one thing that we're real sensitive to is how much we're leaving our neighborhood. So just being available, being here, being present, being willing to go out front and throw the football or, gardening or whatever it is that helps get outside and connect with the neighbor. We got this old school projector and Brandon used his old school laptop and we would play movies and we just pull
Has it changed much? Is it like new school?
It's getting
Okay,
good.
it's good.
So we would just play movies on our garage door, and all the kids would come. We'd say movie night, popcorn. It's so simple,
During the movies, the kids will get sucked into the movie and then the parents kind of back off and just sit around kind of the
It's
perimeter and talk and get to know each other. And it's just really great. Lots of great memories, lots of great conversations.
Brandon and I are pretty intense. We're pretty intentional. We come off strong sometimes, so we have to kind of, we're like, so do you love Jesus? Do you go to church? Do you want to come to our Bible study? And they're kind of like, oh, you're crazy.
We had one situation where a neighbor came over and was kind of caught off guard by some of the conversation topic, the directness about Christ, and kind of reminded her of maybe church when she was a kid, and it kind of left a bad taste in her mouth.
And it was a big mess up. Like, it just really was. And we were like, whoa, that didn't go the way we wanted it to, and God still used it. Like, he was still like, I'm bigger than this, and I can still use something that was out of control or maybe messy. And it was the coolest thing when she came over one day after she had gone to church, and she said, Becca, I get it. Like, I get it. And then it's been neat to kind of help walk through her growth. And it's hard. It's hard, right? It's hard for me. And I think that's what I always remind her of. I'm growing too.
So a lot of times we would spend so much time controlling conversations and making sure things would happen that we thought would foster, a good environment. Actually, when we backed off a little bit and realized we're not in control and the Holy Spirit is in control, there was a lot of relief for them and for us. And time and time again, he's just convinced us that we need to get out of the way a lot of times.
I think one thing we have struggled with is feeling like, okay, we have to have it all together before we can let people in. And I think I would just encourage people, it's never going to be perfect. This has been our 8-year journey, and God has given us this gift and opportunity to really get to know our neighbors, and we've been willing and available, and that's how God's wired us, and we're so grateful for it, but we are still wrestling and figuring it out.
God's humbling us on a regular basis. It's not easy. It's human beings, it's sin, it's brokenness, it's messy. When I think of Christ and what he's done for me, it actually helps me pursue my neighbors in kind of an unconditional, relentless way, kind of like he pursues me every day. We really do feel called to view our neighborhood as a mission field. It's a place that is without Christ. People look different here than they do in other parts of the world, but they have the same needs, they have the same hurts, they have the same life struggles that I think the gospel applies to.
My long-term vision is that everyone on this street is saved, and I pray for it. I am praying for their salvation, and I think God can do it. Like, I really, really do. It's kind of exciting just to talk about, because I'm like, he can do anything.
That's a life we want to live. You hear them say it, man. We view our neighborhood as our calling, man. Everything's sacred. We love the people where we're at. We're called to our neighborhood. As long as we're here, we're going to love on these people. Man, we love our place. And man, you know what? We're going to use our home every day for ministry. You could see it just ebbing and flowing, oozing out of their lives. Man, that's the goal. Every single one of us, that's the responsibility of what we want you to take up. Church, we want to see every man, woman, and child in all of Southern Indiana have a daily encounter with Jesus Christ through words spoken and deeds done by God's people, by us. And again, we're coming to your backyard. I hope you're ready to use yours to bring Christ's presence in a real way to where you live. Let's pray. God, we are so thankful for what you've done for us through Jesus Christ. We know the only reason that we can get on a stage and proclaim it, the only reason that we can go and spread it is because you've done a good work in us. That even though we were broken, that through your son, Jesus Christ, dying on the cross, that we have a hope and a future. You repaired what we had done wrong. God, I pray that isn't something that just is merely good news to us, that's merely something we come and talk about one week on a Sunday, but God, that it would begin to saturate all of our lives. That we would be a church that would do everything we can to bring your presence to all things everywhere, starting to the southern part of this state where we find ourselves situated. And God, I know we have a crazy big vision that you have placed inside of us, God, but I pray that the men and women here that call this their church home would take hold of that vision and do everything they can to live on fire and live in all ways in their ordinary lives in an extraordinary gospel-centered way for you. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Everyone needs compassion, a love that's never failing. Let mercy fall on me. Everyone needs forgiveness, the kindness of a Savior. He's the hope of nations. Savior, He can move the mountain. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, the author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. So take me as you find me, all my fears and failures. Fill my life again, and I give my life to follow everything I believe in. Now I surrender, I surrender. Oh, Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, the author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. So shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, the author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, the author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. So we'll shine our lights and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine our lights and let the whole world see. We're singing